Okay, I'm back. So today we're going to talk about some new books that have just been recently introduced to the library. And everybody, gets on these things or does the blog on the internet on our website, and they talk about books they like. But I'm going to start off with two books that I really did not like very much. The first one is by Jerry House. And Jerry House is a nationally syndicated Nashville DJ. He does a morning show out of Nashville, and he's #1 in Nashville radio. I don't really like books of biographies or even nonfiction books about people where their ego is so big that they take over the book and you're not learning anything. And I think because he's so powerful in Nashville that a lot of country stars kind of have to kiss his butt. And he thinks they adore him, and so he tells wonderful tales about how everybody adores him, and the ego comes off the page and fills up the room and you can't hardly breathe. So I would not recommend this book, but some people may like him. So it does have a lot of stories about Jerry House, not too many inside Nashville stories though. But I'll get rid of that right away. Ugh. I thought that book was the worst book I've read this year so far. No, this is it. The Andy Cohen Diaries. Now, Andy I like to watch what happens live. I love the Housewives. He took the reality TV show format and rechanged it and recalculated it with Queer Eye, and then the Housewives, whatever you want to call it, franchise, I guess. But Andy's just so full of himself and who he's with and where he goes and what he does, and he wants everybody to know. And if you don't really like Andy Cohen, you're not going to know anything about this book because it's all about him. Also, with Andy, he tends to up and down, up and down, up and down. So if he's in a bad mood, you're going to get cranky Andy. And if he's in a good mood, you're going to get ecstatic Andy. And then if he's hanging out with his buddies like SJP, or that's Sarah Jessica Parker, if you don't know. Anyway, if he's hanging out with his buddies, then he's, Kelly Ripa is another one of his drinking buddies. But after a while, you're like, no. I mean, he based this on the Andy Warhol Diaries, which came out about 2 years after Andy Warhol died, which was a really good read because Andy was kind of antisocial. And so he kind of looked at situations as a third person. You can't do that when you have an ego as big as Andy Cohen's. So I did not enjoy this book at all. But a lot of people did because it's on the bestseller list. So, to each his own. Now let's go to some books that I did like. Okay, so as we get ready for the baby boom to die off, not that I'm anticipating that, but it's starting to happen, you're going to see fewer and fewer books about the 1960s from firsthand experience. So you get interpretations, and mainly people who are in their 30s and 40s are writing these interpretations, people who weren't alive in the 60s. This book is pretty much that kind of book. It's about the Fillmore, which is the famous club in San Francisco, and then they opened one on the East Coast. It talks about the people that are there. Bill Graham, of course, is prevalent throughout the whole thing, and I don't think the best Bill Graham biography has been written yet. I think that's coming someday. I don't think it's out there yet. There's several of them out there. Just like the new bookshelf is full of books about Bob Dylan. You can't write about Bob right now. You just can't. Sorry, I'm not gonna read them, and sorry, you just shouldn't be writing them because Bob's got chapters yet to fill. But with this, I'll go back to this book. This was a really interesting read because I didn't know about a lot of the club. I knew that a lot of people played there. Jefferson Airplane, Quicksilver Messenger Service, let's see who else. Well, there's a whole ton of people. The Doors played there, people like that. So it's interesting. They still had witnesses, people that are still alive that could talk about what happened there. And I always like to make judgments based on what other people are saying and hopefully get a fair accounting of this. But it's a really fascinating book about the Fillmore, and I think it's a good read. Well, somebody who has been dead for actually 41 years and is more popular today than when he was alive is Nick Drake. And this is a brand new book about Nick Drake, and it's called Remembrance for a While. And If you don't know who Nick Drake was a singer-songwriter in the very early 70s, late 60s, early 70s. He had 3 records out, and then he died tragically. Most people, and in this book, many people in this book contest that it was not a suicide. It was actually an accidental overdose of depression drugs. That they just didn't know what he didn't know how to handle it, didn't know what he was taking, and didn't get the proper guidance on how to take it. And his parents, to the day they died, both insisted that it was not a suicide. And a lot of his friends said it wasn't a suicide. He was just depressed and took too many pills. Kind of like Judy Garland in a way. Nick Drake really became obscure in the late 70s, and not until really people like Morrissey and Michael Stipe and people who gained great popularity in 80s culture and music mentioned him as an influence, and then the revival of Nick Drake started. And you'll hear his music in many movies now. You'll hear things. The beginning of The Blind Side, they play Daisy Jane, and at the beginning of that movie, if you hear that song as she's driving they're driving Michael Orr to his school, that's Nick Drake. It's a new interpretation of it. It's not his version. His versions are beautiful. His books are very beautiful. His songs and the lyrics, and a lot of lyrics are in here. They talk about each of the records. They talk about him as a person, which is, there's only been one major biography about Nick Drake, because he only lived for 26 years, so what can you say? Although Morrison only lived for 27 years, and there's a lot written about Jim Morrison. Nick Drake is worthy of that kind of admiration. And the stuff is beautiful. And he worked with legendary producer Joe Boyd, who has worked with many people. He worked with R.E.M. at one time. He's worked with other people, Fairport Convention, people from the 60s all the way up into the 90s. And he really believed in Nick Drake. And so Nick would deliver these tapes to his office, didn't even see him, he just put them in the mail chute. And these were these brilliant albums that he had. So if you're interested in Nick Drake or you want to know more about him, this is the book to read. It's a really good read. His sister has written a lot in here, and his mother and his father, before they died, have some stuff in here. So it's a good read, and then I would recommend that you get some Nick Drake, and we have Nick Drake here at the library in the CD selection, and just take it home and listen to it. It's beautiful music. It really is. One of my favorite artists. Okay, so I'm not going to give my age away, but New Wave music was the music of my high school and college years. So I was really excited when I saw this book of the anthology of great New Wave songs. And they go through, there's probably about 60 songs that they call the definitive New Wave songs. Unfortunately, there's not an American artist in this book. And there are American artists. I cannot believe the New Wave does not include Rock Lobster by the B-52s, or something by the Go-Go's, or something by the Bangles, because those were all New Wave bands, and there were a lot of great New Wave bands in America, but I digress. There's a great box set that we have, Left of the Dial, which is New Wave to alternative, and it's a great selection. I would recommend that if you are interested in this era of music. But there's some really good stuff in here. And people that you sometimes forget. And I'm sad that it is, they do the Smiths. Of course they do the Smiths. You have to do the Smiths. And they do the Cure. And they do things like Tainted Love and I Melt With You. And but here's the one that I really love, because everybody knows Berlin, but they know Berlin from, that stupid song from Top Gun, Take My Breath Away. No. Terri Nunn was an actress. That's how I knew her, because she was in all those after-school specials when I was growing up, because she was a teenager. And so when she started singing in Berlin, I thought, this is cool. And the song that I loved that Berlin did was The Metro. And that was like their first big song. And it's a really cool song. And they give it homage here. And that's really, I'm really happy that somebody's recognizing the genius that is Terri Nunn and Berlin. And also, nice write-up on Adam Ant, because Adamant is really important to this era and not too bad to look at from that era. And he's had a pretty troubled life since the early 80s. So it's good to see when he was really, really popular and to see what the fuss was all about. Another band that I really loved, and I'll tell a personal story, is when I was in college, we went to Kansas City to see Men at Work. Okay, I just dated myself. But one of the opening act was another Australian band. And I have to find it here. And so they opened up, and we were sitting there, and all of a sudden this lead singer comes out, and it's like this guy he knew Jagger, he knew Jim Morrison, he was great, the band was great. Apparently there were 3 brothers in the band, and they had been friends, and the famous story that they had formed the band on the day that Elvis died in 1977 in Sydney, Australia. And we sat there and we were just overwhelmed by this band, and it was In Excess. And we left. We didn't even stay for Men at Work, which is probably good anyway. But they do kind of a great story, and there's a great book about In Excess out there. But this is really nice that they actually pay homage to the music of In Excess and not the tragedy that was Michael Hutchence. It's just a great, really fun book if you're from this era. And if you're not and you're looking for music from that era for whatever reason, they give you a pretty good list of songs that you can choose from to look at. And I do wish they would have included some American artists, but you know, it's British authors. What can you say? Okay, so now we'll go from music to acting. And Herbie Pilato, or Pilato, I don't know how you pronounce his name, but Herb, I'm going to call him Herb because he wrote the definitive Bewitched encyclopedia. Everything you ever want to know about Bewitched, this man has it in the Bewitched encyclopedia. 2 years ago, he wrote a great biography of Elizabeth Montgomery, which I think I did a blog on. I'm not sure. I'll have to go back in the archives. He has now written about the girls next door, the women from TV. And I sat and read this in one night. This is fun. Everybody from Stephanie Powers to Linda Carter to Christy McNichol to whiny baby Aaron from the Waltons to Marcia Brady. No Jan, no Cindy, though. I was a little mad about that. But Marcia Brady, the only surviving child from Family Affair, Sissy. I mean, all these, Marlo Thomas is in this. And it's really good. It gives updates about what's happened to them over the years. And Sally Fields starts off the book, who's probably the most famous of all of these girl next door. Goldie Hawn probably also is famous, but anyway, I digress. But it's a really fun read. It talks about the era when they were really, really popular. And people that you don't really think about, like Eleanor Donahue, who was on Father Knows Best and then was on the first 2 seasons of the Andy Griffith Show and has been a character actress for years and years and years. She, her chapter is really, really interesting. Stephanie Powers, really, really interesting of what's happened to her over the years. Julie Newmar is in this book, and many people love Julie Newmar from the Catwoman, from one character she played on a show that only ran for 2 seasons. The last interview with Donna Douglas, Ellie Mae Clampett, is in this book, and she talks a lot about working in that, and also working with Elvis. So, and Mary Tyler Moore is featured in this, and I understand Mary Tyler Moore is not in the best of health right now, so this is a nice little write-up about her. So it's a really good one. Adrienne Barbeau from Maude is nice. I didn't know that she had twins at the age of 52. And so it was really interesting to read about her. But it's a fun read. And so this is, as we're getting ready to go look for summertime books, I would recommend this for like a beach read or a Sunday read. Now, the book that surprised me the most this time, I had seen Danny Aiello on Sunday Morning on CBS a couple months ago. And he was talking about, I think he was bringing out a record and this book. And I thought, oh, I mean, he's a character actor. I liked him in a couple things. One movie, Once Around, one of my favorite movies of all time. He was the patriarch in that movie. But, you know, you think character actors, they're just kind of character actors, you know. You don't think they have lives. This guy has had a fascinating life. He has done a number of weird things. I won't go into all of it because I want you to read the book, but he's done some jail time. He's worked with Paul Newman. He's been nominated for an Oscar. He's worked, Do the Right Thing, of course. Most of you may know him from that. he's had quite the life. And then his late life, he's been singing in cabarets and that kind of circuit. So I was quite surprised. I really ended up liking him a lot. When somebody comes through, and it's written as he talks. So if you've ever seen him in a movie and you know how he talks, this is how this book is written. He's had some tragedies, and he's also been married to the same woman since 1954. So he's had a life, and I think that's a cool thing when you can talk about your life, you make it interesting, you do it in the voice that people would recognize you for. And I just think this is one of the best celebrity autobiographies I've read in a long, long time. And so it's probably going to go in my top 10 for this year. I was really surprised at how much I like this book. So I'll be back some other time with some more stuff, but that's what I've been reading lately, and I hope you enjoyed.